She kept her father's rusted toolbox when everyone said to throw it away. They mocked her for clinging to junk while drowning in debt. But when desperation finally made her pry up the false bottom, what she found inside wasn't just rusty tools. It was $156 million in rare coins that would either save her family or destroy it. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The fluorescent lights in the Riverside Community Hospital emergency room had a particular quality of cruelty. They illuminated everything. Every crack in the linoleum floor, every stain on the plastic chairs, every tear track on Rachel Morrison's face as she sat with her hands pressed against her mouth, trying not to scream. Her son, Tyler, was somewhere behind those double doors. 10 years old. Seizing. Again. The nurse had said words like status epilepticus and airway compromise, and Rachel had nodded like she understood, but all she really heard was the roaring in her ears. The sound of a mother's worst nightmare playing out in real time while she sat helpless in a waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. This was the third seizure in 2 months, each one worse than the last, each one stealing a little more of her son from her. The neurologist had been clear 3 weeks ago. Tyler needed surgery, a specialized procedure to remove the focal point in his brain where the seizures originated. Without it, the seizures would continue. They would worsen. They would eventually kill him or leave him with permanent brain damage. The cost was $340,000. Rachel made $28,000 a year working as a cashier at Morton's hardware store. She'd already been turned down for medical loans from 4 different banks. Her credit was destroyed from medical bills she couldn't pay. Her insurance, the bare minimum catastrophic coverage, classified the surgery as elective. Elective, as if choosing to save your child's life was the same as choosing to get a nose job. Rachel Morrison was 38 years old, and she was out of options. The doors swung open, and Dr. Patricia Chun emerged, still wearing her scrubs. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of face doctors practiced in medical school when they had to deliver news that could destroy you. Mrs. Morrison, Tyler's stable. We got the seizure under control. Rachel's legs went weak with relief. Can I see him? In a few minutes. But Mrs. Morrison, we need to talk. Dr. Chun sat down beside her, and Rachel knew from the tone that this conversation would hurt. This was a grade 4 seizure, much more severe than the previous episodes. We had to intubate him. His brain is swelling from the repeated trauma. But he's okay now? Rachel's voice cracked. For now. But Mrs. Morrison, these seizures are escalating in frequency and severity. The medication isn't working anymore. He needs that surgery, and he needs it soon. We're looking at weeks, not months, before we have a catastrophic event that we might not be able to reverse. Rachel closed her eyes. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can to get the money. I just need more time. Dr. Chin's expression softened. I know you are. I've been fighting with the insurance company on your behalf. But Tyler doesn't have time. His next seizure could leave him in a permanent vegetative state or worse. The words landed like stones in deep water. Sinking. Final. What am I supposed to do? Rachel whispered. Rob a bank? I don't have $340,000. I don't know anyone who has that kind of money. I wish I had answers for you. All I can do is give you the medical facts. And the fact is, your son is running out of time. Rachel sat in the hospital parking lot for an hour after they let her see Tyler. He was sleeping, sedated, small and fragile in a hospital bed with tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped and hummed. She'd held his hand and promised him everything would be okay. Another lie mothers told their children when the world was falling apart. Her car, a 2008 Honda Accord with a cracked windshield and 180,000 miles on it, barely started. The engine made a grinding sound that suggested expensive repairs she couldn't afford. Rachel sat in the driver's seat and stared at the hospital building, at the lit windows where people were dying and being saved based on nothing more meaningful than whether they could pay. Her phone rang. The number was familiar and unwelcome. She answered anyway. Rachel Morrison? Yes. This is Jennifer Torres from Mountain Ridge Medical Billing. I'm calling about your outstanding balance of $18,742. We haven't received a payment in 3 months. I know. I'm working on it. Mrs. Morrison, your account has been flagged for collections. If we don't receive payment or a payment plan agreement within 10 days, we'll have to proceed with legal action. This could include wage garnishment or... Rachel hung up. She couldn't listen, couldn't process one more demand, one more threat, one more reminder of how completely she was failing at keeping her family afloat. She drove home on autopilot. Home was a rental house on the east side of town where the houses were small and the yards overgrown, and nobody asked questions about why a single mother and her sick kid were barely scraping by. The rent was $950 a month, which was already $200 more than she could comfortably afford, but it was close to Tyler's school and the hospital, so she made it work by not eating lunch most days and cutting every other corner she could find. Her sister's car was parked in the driveway. Rachel's stomach tightened. Diane meant well, but her idea of helping usually involved criticism disguised as concern. Inside, Diane sat at the kitchen table with coffee Rachel couldn't afford to replace once it ran out. Her sister was 3 years older, perfectly put together in expensive yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, looking like she'd just stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. "There you are," Diane said. "I let myself in. You really should lock your door, Rach. This neighborhood isn't safe." Rachel set down her purse. "Tyler had another seizure. I've been at the hospital." Diane's face shifted into practiced sympathy. "Oh, honey, is he okay?" "For now. You look terrible. When's the last time you ate?" Rachel couldn't remember. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. None of this is fine." Diane gestured around the cramped kitchen with its peeling wallpaper and ancient appliances. "You can't keep living like this, Rachel. It's not sustainable." "I know that, Diane. Believe me, I know. Have you thought more about what I said? About the assisted living facility for Tyler? There are programs that could help with the cost, and you could work full-time without worrying about his care. I'm not putting my son in a facility." Rachel's voice was sharp. "He's 10 years old, not 90. He needs to be home. He needs medical care you can't provide. He needs his mother." Diane sighed the way she always did when she thought Rachel was being stubborn and stupid. "What about Dad's house? Have you made any progress on clearing it out? The property taxes are due next month, and we're already 2 years behind. If we don't sell it soon, the county's going to seize it. Their father's house." Another problem Rachel didn't have the energy to solve. Thomas Morrison had died 8 months ago. Massive stroke at 67, gone before the ambulance arrived. He'd left behind a cluttered house on 5 acres of land outside town, stuffed with 40 years of accumulated possessions, and a property tax bill that had ballooned to $8,300 because he'd stopped paying years ago. Rachel and Diane were supposed to split everything, but Diane lived 3 hours away and had 2 kids in private school and a husband who managed hedge funds. She couldn't be bothered to help sort through decades of junk. "I've been trying," Rachel said wearily, "but I'm working 6 days a week and taking care of Tyler. I don't exactly have time to clean out a whole house." "Well, you need to make time. That property could sell for $200,000 if we clean it up and list it properly. That's $100,000 each. You could use that money for Tyler's surgery." Rachel had thought about that. Of course she had. But $100,000 was still $240,000 short of what she needed. And that was assuming the house sold quickly, which was unlikely given the real estate market and the condition of the property. "I'll work on it," Rachel said. "You always say that. But nothing changes. Rachel, I love you, but you have to help yourself here. No one's going to swoop in and save you. Dad's gone. Mom's gone. You're on your own, and you need to figure this out." The words stung because they were true. Rachel was on her own. She'd been on her own since Tyler's father walked out when the boy was 2 years old. Since her mother died of cancer 5 years ago. Since her father became too bitter and isolated to be much help to anyone. "I know," Rachel said quietly. "I'm doing my best." After Diane left, Rachel sat at the kitchen table and cried. Not the dignified tears of someone handling grief with grace, but ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for Tyler, for herself, for the unfairness of a world where her son's life came down to money she didn't have and couldn't get. When she finally stopped, it was nearly midnight. She dragged herself upstairs to Tyler's room, empty now because he was still at the hospital for observation. The room was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Lego sets on the floor, books scattered across his bed, a half-finished drawing of a dragon taped to the wall. Rachel picked up his favorite stuffed animal, a worn lion named King, and held it against her chest. Tomorrow she would figure something out. She always did. That's what single mothers did. They figured things out. They kept moving. They didn't give up. But tonight, she let herself break. Just for a little while. The next morning, Rachel called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Her manager, a man named Ed who'd never had a sick day in his life and was proud of it, made disapproving sounds but granted the day off. She drove to her father's house. The Morrison property sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by overgrown fields and rusting farm equipment her father had bought at auction decades ago and never used. The house itself was a modest 2-story farmhouse built in the 1950s, white paint peeling, porch sagging, windows filmed with grime. Rachel parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. She hated this house, hated the memories it held, hated what it represented. Her father hadn't been a bad man, exactly, just a disappointed one. He'd worked construction his whole life, dreamed of being an architect, but never had the education or opportunity. He'd collected things, books about famous buildings, tools he'd used to build his own projects someday, blueprints and sketches, all of it gathering dust while he drank himself into bitterness. After Rachel's mother died, he'd gotten worse, more isolated, more angry at a world that had taken his wife and left him with daughters who disappointed him by being ordinary. Rachel had tried to help. She'd visited, called, brought Tyler by, but her father had pulled further and further away until he was barely speaking to anyone. And then he died, alone in this house. The neighbor had found him 3 days later. Rachel unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit her immediately. Mildew, decay, the particular staleness of a house that hadn't been properly aired out in months. She opened windows, letting in cold October air that helped marginally. The house was chaos. Every surface covered with something. Books, papers, tools, dusty knickknacks. The living room had newspapers stacked to the ceiling from decades ago. The kitchen hadn't been cleaned in months. Dishes molded in the sink. Rachel had made 3 attempts to tackle this mess over the past months, but each time she'd been overwhelmed and given up after a few hours. Today needed to be different. Today she needed to make real progress because Diane was right. They had to sell this place. It was the only asset Rachel had access to. She started in the living room, methodically sorting papers into piles. Trash, important documents, things Diane might want. After 2 hours, she filled 6 garbage bags and barely made a dent. In the dining room, she found boxes of her father's old construction tools. Hammers, saws, levels, tape measures, all rusted and outdated, worth nothing to anyone but too tied to her father's memory to throw away without hesitation. And she found it, the toolbox. It sat in the corner of the dining room, half hidden behind a stack of boxes. Rachel recognized it instantly. Her father's prized possession. A vintage machinist toolbox from the 1940s, solid oak with brass fittings, compartments for every imaginable tool. Her father had shown it to her once when she was a child. "This belonged to my grandfather," he'd said, running his hand over the smooth wood. He was a machinist on a railroad, built half the bridges in this state. This toolbox went everywhere with him. "When I'm gone, this is yours. Take care of it." She'd forgotten about it until now. Rachel pulled the toolbox out from behind the boxes. It was heavy, solid, beautiful despite the dust. She brushed off the top and opened it. Inside were tools. Old wrenches, calipers, micrometers, precision instruments her great-grandfather would have used. Each one carefully placed in its designated spot. Each one a piece of history. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. This was her father. This was what he'd valued. Precision, craftsmanship, things built to last. She closed the toolbox and decided to take it home. Whatever else got thrown away or sold, this would stay. This would be Tyler's someday. A connection to the great-great-grandfather he'd never met and the family history of building things that mattered. She loaded it into her car along with a few boxes of documents, locked up the house, and drove home. That evening, Rachel sat on her living room floor with the toolbox in front of her. Tyler was still at the hospital for another night of observation, so the house was quiet. Too quiet. She opened the toolbox again, examining the tools more carefully. Some were pristine despite their age. Others showed the marks of use. She wondered what her great-grandfather had built with these hands. What bridges he helped construct. What machines he'd maintained. She lifted out a tray of smaller tools, examining the compartment beneath. More tools. A few loose screws. Some folded papers. She pulled out the papers, thinking they might be old receipts or instructions. They were yellowed with age, fragile at the creases. The first was a hand-drawn blueprint. She unfolded it carefully. It showed the design for some kind of gear assembly, meticulously detailed with measurements and notes in faded ink. Beautiful. Useless. But beautiful. The second paper was a letter dated 1952. Dear Thomas, it began. Her great-grandfather's name. I want to thank you again for your work on the Riverside Bridge project. Your precision and skill were instrumental in making sure that structure will stand for generations. I know times have been hard since Margaret passed, but please know your work matters. You're building the bones of the future. That's nothing small. Rachel's throat tightened. She'd never known her great-grandmother had died young. Never knew her great-grandfather had built bridges while grieving. She set the letter aside carefully and continued exploring the toolbox. She removed another tray, and another, getting down to the bottom compartment. Something fell off. The bottom of the toolbox, the space where the deepest tools sat, seemed shallower than it should be. She measured it with her eyes, comparing it to the exterior depth of the box. There was a discrepancy, maybe 2 inches. False bottom. Her heart began to pound. She felt along the edges of the wooden base, looking for a seam, a catch, anything. Her fingers found a small brass button, barely visible against the brass fittings. She pressed it. Click. The bottom panel lifted, hinged at one side. Beneath, it was a hidden compartment. And inside that compartment were coins. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, wrapped in cloth, packed carefully in rows. Rachel's hands shook as she lifted out the first bundle. The cloth was old linen, brittle with age. She unwrapped it carefully. Gold coins. 5 of them, each about the size of a $50, gleaming despite decades in darkness. On one side was a profile of Liberty wearing a coronet. On the other, an eagle. Rachel had never seen anything like them. She unwrapped another bundle. More gold coins, but different. These showed Liberty walking, toga-clad, holding an olive branch. Another bundle. Silver dollars, massive and heavy, dated 1880s. Another. Coin she couldn't identify, foreign-looking with symbols and languages she didn't recognize. Rachel sat surrounded by bundles of coins, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Her great-grandfather had hidden a coin collection in this toolbox. He'd built a false bottom, concealed it perfectly, and filled it with coins that looked old and possibly valuable. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and typed, "Gold coins with Liberty 1800s value." The search results made her vision blur. St. Gaudens double eagles, $20 gold coins from the early 1900s, could be worth anywhere from $2,000 to $50,000 each, depending on year and condition. Liberty Head half eagles, $5 gold coins, $1,000 to $10,000. Morgan silver dollars, $50 to $5,000, depending on mint mark and condition. Rachel's breathing became shallow. She counted the bundles. 37 of them. If each bundle contained even just 5 coins, and if each coin was worth even the minimum estimates. Her phone rang, making her jump. "Dr. Chun, Mrs. Morrison, Tyler's doing well. We'd like to discharge him tomorrow morning if you can pick him up around 10. "Yes, of course. Thank you. And Mrs. Morrison, have you given any thought to what we discussed? About the surgery timeline?" Rachel looked at the coins spread across her floor. "I'm working on it." After hanging up, she spent 3 hours carefully documenting every coin. She photographed them from every angle. She counted them. 342 coins total. Gold, silver, and some foreign pieces she couldn't identify. If even half of them were genuine and worth the lower estimates, she was looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. This could save Tyler. But first she needed to know if they were real. The next morning, Rachel picked up Tyler from the hospital. He was groggy, but smiling, happy to be going home. She drove carefully, hyper-aware of every pothole, every turn, as if sudden movements might shatter this fragile moment of normalcy. "Mom," Tyler said as they pulled into their driveway, "can we watch movies today? I don't feel good enough for school." "We can watch whatever you want, buddy." She got him settled on the couch with blankets and cartoons, then called work and told Ed she needed another day. He was less understanding this time. "Rachel, we're short-staffed as it is. I can't keep covering your shifts." "I understand. I'll be in tomorrow." "You better be." She hung up before he could hear the anger in her breathing. Tomorrow. She'd deal with tomorrow when it came. Today she needed to find out if the coins were real. She searched for coin appraisers in the area and found exactly one. Heritage Numismatics, located in a strip mall 40 minutes away. The website showed a middle-aged man named Robert Perkins standing behind a counter covered in coins. Honest appraisals, fair prices, 30 years experience. Rachel called. A woman answered. "Heritage Numismatics. How can I help you?" "Hi, I have some old coins I need appraised. Can I come in today?" "Sure. We're here until 6. "What kind of coins?" "Gold. Silver. Some foreign ones. They were my great-grandfather's." "Sounds interesting. Come on by." Rachel packed 10 coins into a small box, choosing a variety. She didn't want to bring the entire collection without knowing if they were even worth a trip. She left Tyler with her neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, who doted on the boy and was always willing to help. The drive to Heritage Numismatics felt like traveling through a dream. Rachel kept glancing at the box on her passenger seat, half expecting it to disappear. The shop was small, tucked between a nail salon and a tax preparation office. Rachel walked in, bell chiming above the door. The interior was cramped, walls lined with glass cases displaying coins under harsh lighting. A man sat behind the counter examining something through a jeweler's loupe. He looked up. "Help you? I called about an appraisal. I have some old coins." "Sure. Let's see what you got." Rachel approached the counter and carefully opened her box. She lifted out the first coin, a St. Gaudens double eagle dated 1924. Robert Perkins's expression changed instantly. He set down his loupe and held out his hand. "May I?" Rachel handed him the coin. He turned it over slowly, examining both sides. Then he stood up and walked to a shelf, pulling down a thick reference book. He flipped through pages, comparing the coin to images. "Where did you get this?" His voice was careful, neutral. "It was my great-grandfather's. I found them hidden in his old toolbox." "Them? There are more." "Yes." "How many more?" "About 300. Robert Perkins set down the coin very carefully. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions. Did your great-grandfather collect coins?" "I don't know. I never met him. He died before I was born. And these coins, they've been in your family this whole time? You're not selling them for someone else?" "They're mine." "Well, mine and my sister's. Our father died, and we inherited his house. The toolbox was in there." Perkins picked up the coin again, studying it under a magnifying glass. "This is a 1924 St. Gaudens double eagle. It's in extraordinary condition. MS-65 at least, maybe higher." "Is that good?" "Ma'am, if this coin is genuine, and I'll need to test it to be sure, it's worth approximately $3,000. Maybe more at auction." Rachel's legs went weak. $3,000? For one coin? "Let me see the others." She handed him a box. Perkins examined each coin methodically, making notes, cross-referencing his books. The process took nearly an hour. Rachel stood at the counter, barely breathing. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Morrison, these 10 coins, if they're all authentic, which I believe they are based on preliminary examination, are worth approximately $47,000. The room tilted. Rachel grabbed the counter to steady herself. "And you said you have 300 more?" 332 more. Perkins was quiet for a long moment. "Ma'am, you need to understand what you might have here. If all of your coins are similar quality and variety, if they're authenticated properly, you could be looking at a collection worth several $1 million. "Several million?" "Easily. but I need to see everything. I need to test them, document them, verify authenticity. And Mrs. Morrison, his expression turned serious. You need to be very careful who you tell about this. Coins like these, people have killed for less. Rachel drove home in a daze. Several $1,000,000. The number was so large it had no meaning. It couldn't be real. She picked up Tyler from Mrs. Kowalski's, went through the motions of making dinner, helped him with the homework he'd missed. Normal things. Routine things. While her mind screamed that nothing would ever be normal again. That night, after Tyler was asleep, Rachel sat on her bedroom floor with the toolbox open in front of her. She'd brought it upstairs, unable to leave it out of her sight. She lifted out bundle after bundle, unwrapping each one, trying to comprehend what she'd found. 342 coins. Some gold, some silver, some platinum, some so old and foreign she couldn't begin to guess their value. Her great-grandfather, a railroad machinist, had somehow assembled a collection worth millions, and he'd hidden it so well that it had passed through 2 generations without anyone discovering it. Why? Rachel found her answer in a small envelope tucked at the bottom of the hidden compartment. Inside was a letter, written in the same shaky hand as the blueprint she'd found. To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, I'm long gone and my work is done. These coins represent a lifetime of careful saving and luck. Every paycheck, I put aside what I could. I bought gold when it was cheap during the Depression. I traded and collected and preserved. Not for wealth, but for security. For family. For the future I wouldn't live to see. My son Thomas doesn't know about these coins. He's angry at the world, angry at me, and I fear he'd squander this collection on bitterness. But his children, or his children's children, maybe they'll need this. Maybe they'll use it wisely. I built bridges that will stand for 100 years. I want this collection to do the same. To be a bridge between past and future. To help whoever needs it when the time is right. If you found this, I hope you need it. I hope it helps. And I hope you understand that real wealth isn't gold or silver. It's knowing you built something that lasts. Something that matters. Thomas Morrison, March 1958. Rachel read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her great-grandfather had hidden this fortune specifically so it would skip his bitter son and reach someone who needed it. Someone who would use it to build something good. And Rachel needed it. God, she needed it. But first she had to make sure it was real. That the coins were authentic. That the value was genuine. Because if it wasn't, if this was some cruel joke of fate, she didn't think she could survive the disappointment. She called Robert Perkins first thing in the morning. Mr. Perkins, this is Rachel Morrison. I need to bring you the rest of the collection. All of it. I need to know what it's worth. Can you bring it today? Yes. Come to the shop at closing, 6 o'clock. I'll lock the door and we'll do this privately. And, Mrs. Morrison, don't tell anyone. Don't bring anyone. Just come alone. Rachel took the day off work. Consequences be damned. She packed every coin carefully back into the toolbox, loaded it into her car, and drove to Heritage Numismatics at exactly 6 p.m. Perkins was waiting. He locked the door behind her and flipped the sign to closed. Let's see what you've got. They worked until nearly midnight. Perkins examined every coin with meticulous care. He tested gold content with acid. He measured weight and dimensions. He compared mint marks to reference materials. He photographed everything. Rachel sat in a folding chair, drinking bad coffee from a pot Perkins had made, watching a stranger catalog her entire future. Finally, near midnight, Perkins sat back and removed his magnifying glasses. Mrs. Morrison, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen collections worth millions. I've authenticated coins for museums and private collectors. But I have never in my entire career seen anything like this. Is it real? Every single coin is genuine. Your great-grandfather had an extraordinary eye and incredible luck. He collected some of the rarest American gold coins ever minted. He has coins from mints that only operated for a few years. He has error coins worth more than perfect specimens. He has foreign pieces that are one of a kind. How much? Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. Perkins looked at his notes. Conservative estimate, selling through normal channels, You're looking at $89 million. The number hung in the air like something physical. At auction, with proper authentication and provenance, with the right marketing, this collection could bring $156 million. Maybe more. Rachel couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. $156 million. Tyler's surgery cost $340,000. She could save her son 45 times over with what was hidden in her father's toolbox. What do I do? She finally managed. You need a lawyer. You need security. You need to authenticate everything through professional grading services. And Mrs. Morrison, Perkins's expression was grave. You need to be very, very careful. Once word gets out about this, people will come. Your family, friends, strangers, everyone will want a piece of this. Some of them won't ask nicely. Rachel drove home at 1 a.m. with $156 million worth of coins in her trunk, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the steering wheel. She'd found salvation. She'd found a miracle, and she had no idea what came next. Continued in next section. The next morning began with Tyler having a seizure at breakfast. Rachel had just set down his bowl of cereal when his eyes rolled back and his body went rigid. She caught him before he hit the floor, cushioned his head, turned him on his side, started timing. 90 seconds. An eternity in an instant. When it was over, Tyler was disoriented and exhausted. Rachel called the school to say he wouldn't be in, called work to say she needed another day, and held her son while he cried for frustration and fear. I hate this, he sobbed into her shoulder. I hate my broken brain. Your brain isn't broken, baby. It just works differently, and we're going to fix it. How? You said we can't afford the surgery. Rachel thought about the coins locked in her bedroom closet, about the impossible fortune sitting 20 feet away. I'm working on it. I promise. After Tyler fell asleep on the couch, Rachel made the call she'd been dreading. She dialed Diane's number. Hey, Diane answered. Have you made any progress on Dad's house? The tax deadline is... Diane, I found something. Found what? In Dad's house. In great-grandfather's toolbox. There's a hidden compartment. It's full of coins. Rare coins. They're worth millions. Silence. Then Diane laughed. What are you talking about? I'm serious. I had them appraised. They're real. The collection is worth over $150 million. The laughter stopped. That's not possible. I have documentation. Professional appraisal. Photographs. It's real, Diane. How much did you say? $156 million. Conservative estimate. More silence. Then Diane's voice changed, becoming sharp and businesslike. Half of that is mine. Rachel's chest tightened. The coins were in Dad's house. Legally, yes, we'd split Dad's estate. Exactly. We split everything 50-50. That's $78 million each. When can I see them? I need to figure out the legal stuff first. Make sure everything's done properly. Rachel, I'm coming down there this weekend. We need to discuss this in person. Don't do anything with those coins until I get there. Don't sell anything. Don't talk to anyone. Do you understand? Diane, I'm serious. This is life-changing money. We can't afford mistakes. After hanging up, Rachel sat at her kitchen table and stared at nothing. She'd known Diane would react this way. Had known her sister would immediately calculate her share, already spending money she hadn't earned. But something bothered Rachel. The letter from their great-grandfather specifically said he'd hidden the coins because he didn't trust his son, because he wanted them to reach someone who needed them. Rachel needed them. Diane didn't. Diane's husband made $300,000 a year. They lived in a house worth $2 million. Their kids went to private school and ski trips in Aspen. Was it fair to split this fortune when one sister was drowning and the other was already floating? The thought made Rachel feel guilty and greedy and desperate all at once. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. Mrs. Morrison? This is Detective James Walsh with the Fraud Division. I need to speak with you about some unusual activity we've detected related to coin sales in our area. Rachel's blood went cold. What kind of activity? Can we meet in person? I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop in an hour. Rachel called Mrs. Kowalski to watch Tyler, then drove to the meeting with her stomach in knots. Detective Walsh was waiting in a corner booth. Mid-40s, tired eyes, cheap suit. He stood when she approached. Mrs. Morrison. Thank you for meeting me. What's this about? Walsh pulled out a folder. We've been investigating a coin trafficking ring operating in the region. Stolen coins, forgeries, illegal sales. Your name came up in connection with a large appraisal done at Heritage Numismatics yesterday. I didn't steal anything. Those coins belonged to my great-grandfather. I'm not suggesting you stole them, but I need to verify their provenance. Can you tell me how you acquired them? Rachel explained everything. The toolbox, the false bottom, the letter from her great-grandfather. Walsh took notes. Do you still have the letter? Yes. I'll need to see it. And I'll need documentation proving the coins passed through your family legitimately. Why? What aren't you telling me? Walsh leaned back. Mrs. Morrison, 2 weeks ago, a coin collector in Portland, was murdered during a home invasion. The thieves made off with approximately $3 million in rare coins. Some of those coins match descriptions in your appraisal report. Rachel's hands went numb. That's impossible. These coins have been in my family for 70 years. I hope you're right. But until we verify that, I need you to voluntarily surrender the collection for examination. Surrender it? No, absolutely not. My son needs surgery. Those coins are paying for it. Mrs. Morrison, if any of those coins are connected to the Portland murder, they're evidence. You could be charged as an accessory. I found them in my father's house. And I believe you, but I need proof. Give me a week to verify provenance and run the serial numbers. If everything checks out, you get the coins back and you're clear. If you refuse, I'll get a warrant and you'll be fighting this in court for months. Rachel felt the trap closing around her. Do I need a lawyer? That's up to you. But Mrs. Morrison, I'm trying to help. The easy way is to cooperate. The hard way costs time and money you probably don't have. She thought of Tyler, of the surgery that couldn't wait, of the $156 million that might slip through her fingers because of bureaucracy and suspicion. 1 week, she said. You have 1 week to verify everything. Then I need those coins back. Agreed. Rachel signed paperwork surrendering the coins temporarily. She watched Walsh pack them carefully into evidence bags, each coin cataloged and photographed. When he drove away with them, she felt like she'd lost a limb. Diane arrived that weekend in her Mercedes SUV, wearing designer clothes and barely contained fury. Where are the coins? The police took them. They're verifying provenance. You gave them to the police? Rachel, are you insane? Do you know what they could do? They could seize them, claim they're connected to some crime, and we'd never see them again. They're not connected to any crime. Great-grandfather collected them legally. How do you know? How do you know he didn't steal them? How do you know they're not hot? The question made Rachel's blood boil. Because he wrote a letter explaining everything. Because he was a good man who saved his whole life. A good man who hid a fortune from his own son. Diane shot back. That doesn't sound good to me. That sounds like someone with something to hide. They fought for 2 hours. Diane wanted to hire her husband's lawyers. Rachel wanted to wait for the police investigation to conclude. Diane threatened to sue for her half of the estate. Rachel reminded her that there was no estate until the coins were verified and returned. Finally, exhausted, Diane left with a parting shot. When this blows up in your face, don't come crying to me. I tried to help, and you shut me out. After she was gone, Rachel sat in her empty house and wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Maybe Diane was right. Maybe she should have hidden the coins, found a way to sell them privately, dealt with this quietly instead of through official channels. But it was too late now. The coins were gone. Her fate was in someone else's hands. That night, Tyler had another seizure. Worse than before. Rachel called 911 and rode with him in the ambulance, watching paramedics work to stop the convulsions that were slowly destroying his brain. At the hospital, Dr. Chin met her in the emergency room. Mrs. Morrison, we need to schedule the surgery immediately. Tyler can't wait any longer. These seizures are causing permanent damage. Every day we delay is a day we might not recover from. I'm working on the money. I spoke with administration. They're willing to do the surgery with a down payment of $50,000 and a payment plan for the rest. Can you do that? Rachel thought of the $156 million sitting in an evidence locker. I could do better than that. Just give me 1 more week. Tyler doesn't have a week. Please, 1 week. Dr. Chin looked at Tyler, unconscious and intubated, then back at Rachel. 4 days. That's all I can give you. If we don't schedule surgery by Wednesday, I can't guarantee his recovery. 4 days. Rachel called Detective Walsh from the hospital parking lot. I need those coins back. My son needs surgery this week. Mrs. Morrison, we're still running. I don't care what you're still running. You said 1 week. It's been 3 days. Either charge me with something or give me back my property. I can't just. 4 days. That's what the doctors gave me. If you don't verify those coins and return them by Wednesday, my son dies. Do you understand? He dies. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. I'll expedite the process. I'll call you tomorrow. Tomorrow came and went with no call. So did Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, Rachel was frantic. She called Walsh 12 times. He didn't answer. She drove to the police station and demanded to see him. The desk sergeant looked up her name, made a phone call, then said, Detective Walsh is in a meeting. He'll contact you when he has information. When? My son needs surgery today. Ma'am, I can't give you a timeline. You'll have to wait. Rachel stood in that police station lobby for 4 hours. She called Dr. Chun and begged for more time. The doctor said she'd hold the surgical suite until 6 p.m., but no longer. At 5:30, Detective Walsh finally emerged. Mrs. Morrison, where are my coins? I have good news. Everything checked out. The coins are legitimate. The provenance is solid. You're clear. Rachel's legs nearly gave out with relief. So I can have them back? There's a complication. What complication? Your sister filed a legal claim. She's arguing the coins belong to your father's estate, and she's entitled to half. Until that's resolved, we can't release them to either of you. Rachel's vision went red. You had no right to tell her anything about the police investigation. We didn't. She hired a private investigator who traced the evidence intake. She filed an injunction this morning. My son needs surgery today. I'm sorry. My hands are tied. Rachel drove back to the hospital in a fog of rage and despair. She found Dr. Chun in her office. I don't have the money. I can't get it in time. Dr. Chun closed her eyes. I'll talk to administration. See if we can get emergency approval to proceed and bill you after. Will they do it? I don't know. But Rachel, we're out of time. We need to operate today, or we're risking brain death. The approval came through at 7 p.m. The surgery was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Rachel signed paperwork promising to pay $340,000 she didn't have access to yet, putting herself in a debt that could destroy her even if the coins eventually came through. But Tyler would live. That was all that mattered. She sat in the surgical waiting room for 9 hours. Alone, terrified, praying to a God she hadn't spoken to in years. Please, please save my son. I'll do anything. Give anything. Just let him be okay. At 5:17 a.m., Dr. Chun emerged in her scrubs. He did great. The surgery was successful. We removed the focal point, and his brain is responding beautifully. He's going to be fine. Rachel collapsed into sobs that shook her entire body. Tyler was going to be fine. Over the next 2 weeks, while Tyler recovered in the hospital, Rachel fought the battle of her life. Diane had hired an expensive law firm to argue that the coins were part of their father's estate and should be split equally. Rachel, with the help of a legal aid attorney who took her case pro bono after hearing the story, argued that the great-grandfather's letter specifically indicated the coins were meant to skip his son and go to whoever needed them. The case came down to interpretation. Did the letter constitute a trust? Did it supersede normal inheritance laws? Did Diane have any legal claim to coins that had been deliberately hidden from her father? The judge, a woman named Sandra Reeves, heard arguments for both sides. Diane's lawyer was smooth, expensive, persuasive. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of estate law. The coins are found on property belonging to the late Thomas Morrison. That property and all contents within belong equally to his 2 daughters. Whatever the great-grandfather's intentions, they don't override legal inheritance. Rachel's lawyer, a young woman named Amy Torres, countered, Your Honor, the letter is clear. Thomas Morrison Sr. hid these coins specifically to prevent his son from squandering them. He created a conditional bequest. The coins were to go to whoever found them and needed them. Rachel Morrison found them. Rachel Morrison needs them for her son's medical care. Her sister has no such need and no moral claim. The judge reviewed the letter, the appraisal documents, the hospital bills. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Reeves addressed Rachel directly. Did you know about these coins before you found them? No, Your Honor. And when you found them, what was your first thought? That I could save my son. Mrs. Diane Patterson, the judge turned to Rachel's sister. When did you learn about the coins? When my sister called to tell me. And what was your first thought? Diane hesitated. That we should be careful about how we handled valuable assets. Did you think about your nephew's medical needs? Of course. But that doesn't change the legal. I've heard enough. Judge Reeves cut her off. I'm ruling in favor of Rachel Morrison. The letter from Thomas Morrison Sr. clearly indicates his intent to create a conditional bequest. He wanted the coins to help whoever needed them. Rachel Morrison needs them for her son's medical care. Diane Patterson, by her own admission, does not have similar needs. The coins belong solely to Rachel Morrison. Diane stood up, her face red with fury. This is ridiculous. I'm appealing this. That's your right, Judge Reeves said calmly. But until the appeal is heard, the coins are released to Rachel Morrison's custody. This court is adjourned. Rachel couldn't breathe. She'd won. She'd actually won. Outside the courthouse, Diane confronted her. You're stealing my inheritance. I'm saving my son. Dad would be ashamed of you. Dad didn't even know the coins existed. Great-grandfather made sure of that. I hope Tyler recovers, Diane said coldly. But don't expect me to be part of your life anymore. You made your choice. She walked away, and Rachel watched her go, feeling the weight of a relationship ending, but also the weight of a life being saved. Tyler came home from the hospital 3 weeks after surgery. He was thinner, his head partially shaved with a healing scar, but his eyes were clear and bright. No seizures since the operation. None at all. Mom, he said the first night home, lying in his own bed for the first time in a month. Am I going to be okay now? Yeah, baby. You're going to be better than okay. How did you afford this surgery? Rachel thought about how to explain it. About great-great-grandfather's toolbox, about hidden coins, about miracles that came disguised as rusted old brass and oak. Remember great-grandpa's toolbox I brought home? It had a secret inside, a gift from our family in the past to help us in the present. Tyler smiled sleepily. Like a treasure? Exactly like a treasure. Cool. He fell asleep within minutes, breathing easy and steady. Rachel sold the coin collection through a specialized auction house 3 months later. The process was exhausting, involving authentication, marketing, provenance verification. But when the final gavel came down, the total was even higher than Robert Perkins had estimated. $164 million. After taxes, fees, and auction costs, Rachel netted $97 million. She paid Tyler's hospital bills. She set up a medical trust for him that would cover any future healthcare needs. She established a foundation to help other families afford emergency medical care for their children. She bought a modest house, nothing ostentatious. She quit her job at the hardware store and went back to school to become a nurse, wanting to help people the way Dr. Chun had helped Tyler. She tried to reconcile with Diane, but her sister refused all contact. Some wounds, Rachel learned, didn't heal just because you had money to throw at them. The Morrison Estate Toolbox Collection, as it became known, toured museums across the country. Each exhibit included the story of Thomas Morrison Sr., railroad machinist, who'd built a bridge to the future in the form of hidden coins. And at every exhibit, there was a letter from Rachel Morrison. My great-great-grandfather saved his whole life to build something that would last. He hid a fortune not for wealth, but for whoever would need it when the time came. I needed it. My son needed it. And it saved us. But more than that, it taught me something important. Real treasure isn't gold or silver or coins worth millions. Real treasure is knowing that someone generations ago cared enough about the future to build a bridge to it, to leave something behind that would matter. I hope everyone who sees this collection understands that. We're all building bridges to the future, sometimes with money, sometimes with time, sometimes just with love and hope. And sometimes those bridges save lives in ways we can't imagine. My great-great-grandfather built bridges across rivers. But he also built a bridge across time. And when my son needed it most, that bridge was waiting. That's the real treasure. 10 years later, Rachel stood in her father's old house, now fully restored and converted into a museum dedicated to railroad history and the Morrison family story. Tyler, now 20 years old and healthy, stood beside her. He'd grown tall and strong, planning to study medicine, inspired by the doctors who'd saved his life. "Mom," he said, looking at the toolbox displayed in a glass case, "do you ever regret it? Selling the coins instead of keeping them?" Rachel thought about the question, about the $97 million that had changed their lives, about the $67 million she still had after all the foundations and trusts and gifts, about Diane, who still wouldn't speak to her. "No," she said finally. "The coins were never meant to be kept. They were meant to be used." Great-great-grandfather understood that. Real wealth is what you do with it, not what you hoard. Do you think he'd be proud? I think he'd be proud we used his gift the way he intended. To help people. To build something good. Tyler nodded, then smiled. "I'm going to be a doctor, you know. Like Dr. Chun. I'm going to save kids like me." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Great-great-grandfather will be proud of that, too. You're building your own bridge to the future. They stood together in the museum, surrounded by the history of a family that had built literal bridges and metaphorical ones, and Rachel understood something profound. The treasure had never been about the money. It had been about the choice, about what you did when given the power to change everything. She'd chosen to save her son, to help others, to honor the past while building the future. And that, she realized, was the only treasure that really mattered. The kind you earned by doing the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The kind that built bridges across generations, across time, across the distance between desperation and hope. The museum closed at 6, and Rachel found herself alone in the building, walking through rooms that told the story of her family's unexpected legacy. Tyler had left to meet friends, promising to be home by 10. At 20, he was independent, healthy, living the normal life she'd once thought was impossible. She stopped in front of a display case showing her great-great-grandfather's original tools. The wrenches and calipers gleamed under museum lighting, each one a testament to precision and craftsmanship. Beside them was a video screen playing interviews she'd done over the years, explaining how the discovery had happened. Rachel barely recognized herself in those early interviews. 10 years ago, she'd been gaunt, exhausted, desperate. Now, at 48, she looked healthy. Content. The fear that had lived in her eyes for so long was finally gone. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Marcus Webb. I'm writing a book about hidden fortunes and family legacies. I'd love to interview you about the Morrison collection. Are you available tomorrow?" Rachel had done hundreds of interviews over the years, written a book herself about the experience. But something about this message felt different. She texted back, "How did you get this number?" "Through the Museum Foundation. I've been researching your great-great-grandfather's life. I found something I think you should see. Can we meet?" Rachel's instincts prickled. After 10 years in the spotlight, she'd learned to recognize when someone was fishing for information versus when they genuinely had something important to share. "What did you find?" "A second letter. From your great-great-grandfather. Written in 1962, for years after the first one. It was sealed in a safety deposit box at a bank that recently closed. The contents were being cataloged for escheatment when a clerk recognized the Morrison name from your museum." Rachel's heart began to pound. "What does it say?" "I'd rather show you in person." "Tomorrow? 10 a.m. at the museum?" She agreed, then spent a sleepless night wondering what else her great-great-grandfather could have left behind. What else he'd wanted to say. Marcus Webb arrived exactly at 10. He was younger than Rachel expected, maybe 35, with professor-style glasses and a messenger bag worn smooth from years of use. He had the earnest look of someone who loved research more than people. "Mrs. Morrison, thank you for seeing me." He shook her hand firmly. "I promise this isn't a waste of your time." They sat in Rachel's office, a small room at the back of the museum filled with filing cabinets and photos. Marcus pulled a weathered envelope from his bag, protected in a clear archival sleeve. This was in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, rented under the name Thomas Morrison in 1962. The bank closed last month after a merger. When they were processing abandoned boxes, this turned up. Rachel stared at the envelope. Her great-great-grandfather's handwriting, unmistakable even through the protective plastic. "Have you read it?" she asked. "Yes. I had to, for verification. But Mrs. Morrison, what's inside? It changes everything you thought you knew about your family." Rachel's hands shook as she opened the archival sleeve and carefully removed the letter. The paper was yellowed, but intact, preserved by decades in a climate control vault. She began to read. April 1962. "To whoever finds this after I'm gone. If you're reading these words, you found my first letter and the coins I left behind. You've used them wisely, I hope. But there's more to the story. More you need to know. My name is Thomas Morrison, but that wasn't always my name. I was born Victor Malkin in 1891 in a small village outside Moscow. I came to America in 1913, just before the Great War, escaping persecution and poverty. I changed my name, started over, built a life. In 1912, before I left Russia, I worked briefly as a courier for a wealthy merchant family. The Romanovs were distant cousins of the Tsar, collectors of art and antiquities. When the revolution started brewing, they knew they needed to move their wealth out of Russia. They gave me coins, thousands of them, gold, platinum, silver, rare pieces from across Europe and Asia. They told me to take them to America to keep them safe until the family could escape and reclaim them. I waited. I waited years, but they never came. The revolution consumed them. The entire family disappeared, probably executed. And I was left in America with a fortune that belonged to dead people. I couldn't bring myself to spend it, couldn't profit from their tragedy. So I collected more coins, added to their collection, and hid everything away, waiting for, I don't know what, some sign that I should do something with it. Then I met Margaret, my wife, my light. She convinced me that holding on to the past was pointless, that the Romanovs would want their wealth used for good, not locked away, gathering dust. But I still couldn't sell it, couldn't let go. So I hid it, built that false bottom, wrote the first letter, hoped that whoever found it would use it better than I could. But here's what I never wrote in that first letter. Here's what I need you to know. The coins aren't the whole story. The Romanovs gave me more than coins. They gave me documents, deeds to property, art certificates, bearer bonds, things I couldn't convert to cash without raising questions about who I was and where I come from. I hid those too, separately, safely. In case the coins were ever found, the other assets would remain protected until someone proved themselves worthy. If you found the coins and used them well, then you've proven yourself. The rest of the Romanov fortune is yours as well. It's hidden in the place where I built my greatest work, the place where I spent 20 years of my life creating something that would last, the place where I left my mark on the world. Find that place. Find a cornerstone I laid, and you'll find the rest. I pray you use it wisely. The Romanovs were good people who died for being born into the wrong family at the wrong time. Their wealth shouldn't die with them. It should live, should help, should matter. If you're reading this, you've already done good with what I gave you. Now do more. Thomas Morrison, formerly Victor Malkin. April 1962. Rachel set down the letter with trembling hands. There's more. Marcus nodded. According to this, yes. A second cache, possibly worth even more than the coins. Where? What does he mean by the place where I built my greatest work? That's what I've been researching. Your great-great-grandfather worked on dozens of bridges and structures across the state. But there was one project he spent more time on than any other, one that he referenced in personal correspondence as his masterpiece. Marcus pulled out a folder thick with photocopied documents. The Riverside Bridge, built between 1938 and 1941. It was a massive project for the time, spanning the Columbia River. Your great-great-grandfather was the lead machinist. He designed custom components, created unique solutions for structural challenges. And according to these letters I found in the state archives, he personally laid the cornerstone. Rachel's mind raced. The Riverside Bridge is still standing. Yes, It's a historic landmark now, protected by the National Register. And Mrs. Morrison, if your great-great-grandfather hid something in that cornerstone, it's been sitting there for 80 years waiting. We need to excavate it. Marcus winced. That's complicated. It's federal property. Historic preservation laws apply. We need permits, archaeological oversight, probably a court order. How long would that take? Months, maybe a year. Rachel thought about Tyler, now healthy and thriving. Thought about the foundation that had helped thousands of families. Thought about her great-great-grandfather's words. The rest is yours as well. We start the paperwork today, she said. Whatever it takes, we find out what he left behind. The process was exactly as complicated as Marcus predicted. Rachel hired lawyers who specialized in historic preservation. She filed petitions with the National Register. She contacted the State Transportation Department, the Army Corps of Engineers, and 3 different federal agencies. Everyone said the same thing. Excavating a cornerstone from a protected historic bridge was unprecedented. The paperwork alone would be staggering. The environmental impact studies, the structural engineering assessments, the archaeological protocols. But Rachel had resources now. Money, influence, media attention. She leveraged all of it. She gave interviews explaining her great-great-grandfather's story. How he'd hidden the coin collection that saved her son's life. How a second letter suggested more remained hidden. How uncovering it could potentially fund medical research, educational programs, historic preservation. Public opinion shifted in her favor. Local news ran human interest pieces. National outlets picked up the story. Suddenly, denying Rachel Morrison the right to excavate her great-great-grandfather's cornerstone looked like bureaucracy crushing a heartwarming family legacy. 6 months after Marcus Webb walked into her office, Rachel received approval. The excavation was scheduled for September 15th, exactly 82 years after Thomas Morrison had laid that cornerstone. The day arrived cold and gray, typical Pacific Northwest autumn weather. Rachel stood on the bank of the Columbia River, watching a team of engineers and archaeologists prepare their equipment. The Riverside Bridge loomed above them, a testament to Depression-era engineering. Massive stone supports, steel trusses, Art Deco details. It had carried millions of vehicles over 8 decades, never knowing what secrets it held. Tyler stood beside Rachel, now a second-year medical student. Diane hadn't responded to the invitation to attend. 10 years later, she still refused contact, apparently content to live with her bitterness. Marcus Webb was there with his cameras and recording equipment, documenting everything for his book. Dr. Chun had come, taking a day off from the hospital where she still practiced. Even Robert Perkins, the coin dealer who'd first authenticated the collection, had driven out to witness this moment. The lead archaeologist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, approached Rachel. "We're ready to begin. I want to set expectations. The cornerstone may be empty. Your great-great-grandfather may have been speaking metaphorically, or whatever was inside may have deteriorated over 8 decades. I understand," Rachel said, "but we have to look." The excavation was painstakingly slow. The team couldn't risk damaging the bridge's structural integrity. They used ground-penetrating radar first, confirming there was a hollow space behind the cornerstone. Then came careful removal of surrounding stonework, creating access without compromising stability. For hours in, they reached the cornerstone itself. It was massive, 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, carved from limestone with the date 1941 and Thomas Morrison's initials barely visible in one corner. Dr. Kim used specialized tools to probe around the edges. There's a seam. It's been sealed with some kind of waterproof compound. This stone was meant to be removed. The crowd that had gathered pressed closer. News cameras focused on the stone. Rachel held her breath. It took another hour to safely extract the cornerstone. When it finally came free, revealing a dark cavity behind it, everyone fell silent. Dr. Kim shined a flashlight inside. There's something there. A metal box. 2 assistants reached in carefully and pulled out a steel container about the size of a small suitcase. It was heavy, requiring both people to lift it. The surface showed rust, but the seals appeared intact. They carried it to a table under a canopy where the examination would happen. Dr. Kim produced tools to carefully open the corroded locks. Rachel's heart hammered. This was it. Whatever her great-great-grandfather had deemed important enough to hide for 8 decades was about to be revealed. The locks gave way. Dr. Kim lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilskin and wax paper, were bundles. Dozens of them. Dr. Kim carefully lifted out the first bundle and unwrapped it. Documents. Old paper, brittle but preserved. The first was written in Russian, ornate script with an official-looking seal. Marcus leaned in, his Russian language skills finally useful. It's a deed to property in St. Petersburg, dated 1911. Signed by, he paused, his face going pale. Signed by Grand Duke Mikhail Romanov. The crowd erupted in whispers. Rachel's vision blurred. Romanovs. Her great-great-grandfather really had been connected to the Russian royal family. Dr. Kim unwrapped more bundles. Each contained similar documents. Property deeds, share certificates in companies that no longer existed, bank records from institutions long closed, and art certificates, dozens of them listing paintings and sculptures that had been lost during the Russian Revolution. This is incredible, Dr. Kim breathed. These are primary source documents from the fall of the Romanov dynasty. The historical value alone is immeasurable. But what about actual value? Tyler asked, can any of this be converted to money? Marcus was photographing documents frantically. Some of these properties still exist. The buildings might be owned by the Russian government now, but there could be legal claims. The art certificates, if the pieces are ever recovered, could establish provenance. The share certificates might have successor companies. This would take years to sort out legally. They spent 3 hours cataloging the contents of the steel box. When they finished, Dr. Kim provided a preliminary assessment. Historically, this is priceless. These documents fill gaps in our understanding of how the Romanov family attempted to preserve their wealth. Financially, she shrugged. That's for lawyers and economists to determine. Rachel felt a strange mixture of excitement and disappointment. She'd hoped for something concrete. More gold, more coins, something that could immediately fund the foundation's work. Instead, she had documents that might be valuable or might be elaborate historical footnotes. That night, Rachel sat in her home office, surrounded by photocopies of the documents. Marcus had arranged for the originals to be stored in a climate-controlled university vault while they figured out next steps. She was reading through a property deed, trying to make sense of the legal language, when her phone rang. Mrs. Morrison? This is Alexei Volkov. I'm calling from Moscow. Rachel's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? I represent certain interests in Russia who have been following your story with great interest. The discovery today, the documents from the Romanov family, they're very significant. Significant how? My clients would like to acquire them. We're prepared to offer $50 million. Cash. No questions asked. Rachel's breath caught. $50 million for documents? The Romanov legacy is controversial in Russia. Many people would prefer certain histories remain buried. My clients are willing to pay generously to ensure these documents don't become public. You want to suppress them. We want to preserve privacy and dignity. Surely you understand the value of keeping family matters private. Rachel thought about Diane, about the public battle over the coins, about how money had destroyed their relationship. I'll think about it, she said, and hung up. She called Marcus immediately. Someone from Russia just offered me $50 million to keep the documents private. Don't take it, Marcus said instantly. Rachel, those documents belong in museums. They're history. You can't let them be buried again. $50 million could help a lot of families. And suppressing the truth would dishonor your great-great-grandfather's sacrifice. He risked everything to bring those documents out of Russia. He preserved them for 80 years. You can't let them disappear now. Rachel knew he was right. But $50 million was a staggering amount of money. Over the next week, the offers kept coming. Russian oligarchs, private collectors, museums, universities, everyone wanted the Romanov documents. The highest offer came from a consortium of European museums, $75 million for the complete collection, with the stipulation that everything would be digitized and made publicly available. Rachel's lawyers advised her that the documents were legally hers, found on American soil, connected to her ancestor, properly excavated with all necessary permits. She could sell them to whoever she wanted. But there was another complication. The Russian government filed a claim, arguing the documents were stolen property that belonged to the Russian people. They demanded the documents be returned without compensation. It's a political move, Rachel's lead attorney explained. They don't want the Romanov legacy examined too closely. It reminds people of the aristocracy of pre-Soviet Russia. They'd rather it all stay buried. Can they force me to give the documents back? They can try. It will be a lengthy legal battle. International law, cultural heritage claims, it gets complicated. But honestly, you have a strong case. Your great-great-grandfather was given these documents legally by their owners. He preserved them. You found them. The Russian government abandoned any claim decades ago. The case went to international arbitration. For 6 months, lawyers argued about ownership, cultural heritage, and the rights of revolutionaries versus the rights of refugees. Rachel testified about her great-great-grandfather's story, how he'd fled persecution, how he'd been entrusted with the Romanov wealth, how he'd preserved it not for profit, but for posterity. The arbitration panel, made up of judges from 5 different countries, ultimately ruled in Rachel's favor. The documents belonged to her. She could do with them as she pleased. The Russian government appealed. Rachel's lawyers fought back. The case dragged on for another year. During that time, Rachel's foundation continued its work, funding medical care for families who couldn't afford it. Tyler graduated medical school and began his residency in pediatric neurology, inspired by the doctors who'd saved his life. And Rachel waited for the legal system to finally decide the fate of her great-great-grandfather's second gift. The final ruling came on a Tuesday morning. Rachel sat in her lawyer's office, Tyler beside her, as they read the decision. The appeals court had upheld the original ruling. The documents were Rachel's. All claims by the Russian government were dismissed. You're free to sell them, her lawyer said. The European Museum Consortium is still interested. So are several others. Rachel thought about her great-great-grandfather's words. Use it wisely. Do good. Help people. I'm not selling them, she said. Tyler looked at her in surprise. Mom, that's $75 million. Think of how many families the foundation could help. I am thinking about that, but I'm also thinking about what great-great-grandfather wanted. He didn't hide these documents so they could be sold. He hid them so they could be preserved, so the story could be told. She turned to her lawyer. I want to donate them to a consortium of museums and universities, free of charge, with the stipulation that everything is digitized, made publicly available, and used for research and education. You're giving away $75 million? Her lawyer asked. I'm giving away documents that were never really mine. They belong to history, to everyone who wants to understand what happened when an empire fell and families tried to survive. Tyler smiled. Great-great-grandfather would be proud. I hope so. The donation was announced at a press conference 2 weeks later. Rachel stood before cameras and explained her decision. My great-great-grandfather gave me a gift twice. First with the coins that saved my son's life. Second with these documents that tell a story bigger than any one family. I used the first gift to help my family. I'm using the second gift to help everyone understand their history. Money comes and goes, but knowledge, truth, understanding, those things last forever. That's the real treasure. The story went viral. Rachel Morrison, the woman who'd turned down $75 million to preserve history, became a symbol of integrity in an age obsessed with wealth. Universities created scholarships in her name. The Morrison Foundation received donations from around the world. And most surprisingly, Diane reached out. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Diane looked older, harder. Success and bitterness had carved lines into her face. I saw your press conference, Diane said. You gave away $75 million. It wasn't mine to keep. Everything we found, you gave away or spent on other people. Do you ever regret it? Ever wish you'd kept some of it for yourself? Rachel thought about the question honestly. No, Because keeping it would have meant becoming someone I don't want to be. Someone who values money over people. Overdoing what's right. Diane stirred her coffee. I've been angry at you for 10 years. Angry that you got the coins. Angry that the judge sided with you. Angry that you became this celebrated figure while I was just the greedy sister in the background. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. That's what makes it worse. You weren't trying to be better than me. You just were better. Are better. Diane's eyes filled with tears. I've had everything money could buy for 10 years. But I lost my sister. And I'm starting to realize that was the worst trade I ever made. Rachel reached across the table and took Diane's hand. You didn't lose me. I've been here the whole time, waiting for you to come back. They cried together in that coffee shop, repairing a relationship that had been broken by greed and pride. It wouldn't be perfect. They'd never be as close as they'd been before. But it was something. A bridge rebuilt, one careful conversation at a time. 5 years later, Rachel stood in the Moscow Museum of Russian History. The Romanov documents were displayed in a special exhibition, digitally preserved and available to researchers worldwide. She'd been invited to speak at the opening, along with Marcus Webb, whose book about the Morrison collection had become an international bestseller. Ladies and gentlemen, Rachel began, speaking to an audience of historians, politicians, and descendants of families touched by the Russian Revolution. My great-great-grandfather was born Victor Malkin. He became Thomas Morrison. He lived through revolution, immigration, persecution, and triumph. And through it all, he held on to a belief that some things matter more than money. He could have sold the Romanov fortune, could have become wealthy beyond imagination. But he chose to preserve it, to protect it, to wait until someone came along who would value it properly. I found his first gift when I was desperate, drowning in debt, watching my son die. Those coins saved us. But they also taught me that wealth without purpose is meaningless. His second gift taught me that some treasures aren't meant to be owned. They're meant to be shared, to be studied, to be understood by everyone who wants to learn from the past. Today, these documents are available to anyone with an internet connection. Students in schools across the world can see primary sources from one of history's most dramatic moments. Researchers can fill in gaps in our understanding. And descendants of the families who lost everything can see proof that their ancestors tried to preserve their legacy, their culture, their history. That's worth more than any dollar amount. That's the real treasure. The speech received a standing ovation. Afterward, an elderly woman approached Rachel. She was small, elegant, with aristocratic features and eyes that held decades of sorrow. Mrs. Morrison, the woman said in accented English. My name is Anastasia Romanova. I am the great-granddaughter of Grand Duke Mikhail, the man whose signature appears on those deeds. Rachel's breath caught. I'm honored to meet you. I wanted to thank you for preserving these documents, for making them public. My family's history has been suppressed, denied, distorted for a century. These documents prove we existed, that we tried to survive, that we mattered. Tears rolled down the woman's weathered cheeks. You gave us back our story. No amount of money could have done that. They embraced, two women separated by generations and continents, connected by a machinist who'd fled Russia with a fortune and a conscience. That night, back in her hotel room, Rachel called Tyler. How was the opening? Her son asked. He was 30 now, a successful pediatric neurologist, married with a baby daughter they named Margaret after Rachel's great-great-grandmother. Perfect. I met a Romanov descendant. She thanked me for preserving her family's history. Sounds like great-great-grandfather's plan worked out exactly as he hoped. Yeah, it did. Rachel paused. Tyler, do you ever wonder if there's more? If he left other things hidden? Tyler laughed. Mom, you found $164 million in coins and priceless historical documents. I think that's enough treasure for one lifetime. You're probably right. But after hanging up, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling. Her great-great-grandfather had been methodical, careful, patient. He'd hidden the coins in a toolbox, the documents in a bridge cornerstone. Both discoveries had required the right person finding them at the right time. What if there was more? What if the story wasn't finished? She pulled out her laptop and opened the digital archive of her great-great-grandfather's letters. She'd read them hundreds of times, but maybe she'd missed something. Some clue, some hint. She read until 2 a.m., finding nothing new. Finally, exhausted, she closed the laptop and tried to sleep. She dreamed of bridges, of cornerstones, of hidden compartments and letters written in shaking hands. And in the dream, her great-great-grandfather spoke to her. "You found 2 gifts," his voice said, "but the third is the most important, the one that will tell you who I really was, who we all really are." Rachel woke with a start. 3 gifts. He'd left 3 gifts. She grabbed her phone and called Marcus, not caring that it was 3 a.m. in Oregon. "Marcus, wake up. I need you to go through every document we have from great-great-grandfather. Every letter, every scrap of paper. Look for references to the number 3, to third gifts, to anything that suggests there's more." Marcus, groggy but intrigued, promised to start immediately. 3 days later, he called back. "I found something." In his personal journal from 1955, one entry just says, "Third cornerstone laid. The final gift is secure. Only the worthy will find it when the time comes." Third cornerstone? He worked on hundreds of buildings. Which one? That's what I've been researching. I cross-referenced every project he worked on with cornerstone laying ceremonies. Most were laid by politicians or company executives. But there are 3 projects where he personally laid the cornerstone. The Riverside Bridge was one. Right. The second was the Gresham School, built in 1936. But that building was demolished in 1982 to make room for a shopping mall. And the third, the Morrison Memorial Library, built in 1948. It's still standing. Rachel's pulse quickened. Morrison Memorial Library? Who was it memorializing? His wife, Margaret Morrison. She died in 1947. He funded the library in her honor and personally supervised construction. Of course, he'd hide his final gift in a building dedicated to her memory. 2 weeks later, Rachel stood outside the Morrison Memorial Library in Portland. It was a beautiful building, classical architecture with columns and wide stone steps. Above the entrance, carved in granite, in memory of Margaret Morrison, 1895 to 1947. She believed in the power of knowledge. Tyler accompanied her, taking a day off from the hospital. Marcus was there with his recording equipment. And this time, Diane had come too, their relationship slowly healing. The library director, a woman named Catherine Mills, met them at the entrance. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm honored to have you here. When you explained about your great-great-grandfather and the cornerstone, I immediately checked our records. The cornerstone ceremony was documented in our archives." She led them to a reading room where she'd laid out old photographs and newspapers. June 1948. Thomas Morrison laid the cornerstone himself. There was a small ceremony. He gave a speech about how libraries preserve knowledge, and how knowledge is the greatest treasure any civilization can possess. Rachel studied the photographs. Her great-great-grandfather looked old in them, 70 years old, his face lined with age and grief. But his eyes were sharp, determined. Did he leave any instructions about the cornerstone? Rachel asked. "Not that I know of, but there's something interesting. Every year on the anniversary of the library's opening, someone sends flowers to place by the cornerstone. They've been arriving like clockwork for 77 years. No card, no name, just flowers." Rachel's breath caught. Someone's been maintaining a tradition for 77 years? Who? We don't know. The florist payment is automated, comes from an old trust. We try to track it down, but the law firm that set it up doesn't exist anymore. "He set it up," Rachel said with certainty. "Before he died. A way of marking the location, keeping the tradition alive until someone figured it out." "Should we excavate?" Tyler asked. Catherine Mills looked uncomfortable. "The library is a historic landmark. We can't just dig up the foundation. We'd need permits, city approval, historic preservation oversight." "I know the process," Rachel said. "I've been through it before. Let's start the paperwork." It took 8 months this time, faster than the Riverside Bridge, because Rachel now had experience navigating the bureaucracy. She knew which agencies to contact, which arguments to make, which pressure points to apply. The excavation was scheduled for May 15th, exactly 77 years after the library's opening. A smaller crowd gathered this time. The media had covered the first two discoveries extensively. A potential third felt like overkill to some outlets. But the local news was there, and several documentary filmmakers who'd been following Rachel's story for years. The same archaeological team, led by Dr. Sarah Kim, prepared their equipment. They used ground-penetrating radar on the cornerstone and found the same result: a hollow space behind it. Your great-great-grandfather really liked hiding things in cornerstones, Dr. Kim said with a smile. The extraction process took 6 hours. This cornerstone was larger than the Riverside bridges, set deeper into the foundation. But finally it came free. Behind it was another steel box, similar to the first but larger. And beside it, something unexpected, a leather-bound book. Dr. Kim carefully removed both items. The book was wrapped in oilskin, preserved perfectly. The steel box was sealed with wax and wire. They brought everything to a table under the library's portico. Rachel's hands shook as Dr. Kim opened the leather book first. Inside was handwriting, page after page of careful script. Rachel recognized it immediately as her great-great-grandfather's. The first page read, "My true testament. For the one who finds this, may you have the wisdom to understand what I could not." Rachel began reading aloud, her voice catching with emotion. "My name is Victor Malkin. This is my true story, written without fear now that death approaches and I have nothing left to lose. I was born in Russia to a Jewish family. We were merchants, middling successful, until the pogroms began. My father was killed in 1910. My mother and sisters fled to Poland. I was 17, alone, desperate. I found work with the Romanov family as a courier. Not the Tsar's immediate family, but cousins. Grand Duke Mikhail and his household. They were kind to me, treated me like a person, not just a Jew to be tolerated. When revolution came, they knew they were doomed. The family gave me everything they could carry: coins, documents, jewelry, deeds. They told me to run, to take it to America, to keep it safe until they could escape. I promised I would, but they never came. I waited in America for years, using false papers, a false name. Thomas Morrison, good American name. Nobody questioned a machinist who spoke perfect English and worked hard. But the guilt consumed me. I had a fortune that belonged to dead people. Good people who'd show me kindness when the world was cruel. I couldn't spend it. Couldn't profit from their deaths. Couldn't even put in a bank because someone might ask questions about where a machinist got that kind of wealth. So I hid it. Built false bottoms, sealed cornerstones, created puzzles that only someone worthy would solve. The coins I left for family, for whoever needed them desperately enough to look beyond the obvious. The documents I left for history, for everyone who deserved to know the truth about what happened when an empire fell. But this, the third gift, I leave for myself, for my own truth to be known. In this box are letters, hundreds of them, written by the Romanov family in their final years. Personal letters, not about property or wealth, but about life, about fear and hope and love, about being human in impossible circumstances. I couldn't destroy them, but I couldn't share them either. They were too personal, too painful. These letters show that the aristocrats we demonized were just people. Scared people trying to protect their children, trying to find meaning in a world collapsing around them. I'm leaving them here in a library because libraries preserve truth. All kinds of truth, even truths that make us uncomfortable. If you found this, you've proven yourself worthy by finding the first two gifts, by using them wisely, by choosing to preserve and share rather than hoard. Now I ask you to make one final choice. These letters are intimate, private. Reading them feels like violating the dead. But they're also history, primary sources from one of the most dramatic moments in human history. Do you share them? Let the world see the humanity behind the history? Or do you rebury them? Respect the privacy of people who never asked to be part of a revolution? I couldn't make that choice. I was too close, too guilty, too consumed by my promise to protect them. But you, whoever you are, you're far enough removed. You can see clearly. You can decide what serves history best. Whatever you choose, know this: you've done me proud. You found my gifts. You used them well. And you've given voice to people who had no voice for a century. Thank you. Victor Malkin, also known as Thomas Morrison. February 1958. Rachel's voice faded. Tears streamed down her face. Around her, the crowd stood in silence. Tyler spoke first. He left the hardest choice for last. What's in a box? Diane asked quietly. Dr. Kim carefully opened the steel container. Inside were letters. Hundreds of them, bundled by year, written in Russian on fine stationery that had somehow survived 8 decades. Marcus picked up the first bundle and carefully unfolded a letter. He read silently, his Russian language skills translating in real time. His expression shifted from curiosity to sadness to something like awe. Rachel, he said quietly, these are extraordinary. They're from Grand Duchess Xenia to her children. Written in 1917, weeks before the revolution reached its peak. She's describing everyday life. Her daughter's piano lessons. Her son's progress in mathematics. Worries about whether they have enough firewood for winter. He picked up another. This one is from Grand Duke Mikhail to his wife. He's describing a sunset. Just describing it. The colors, the way light hit the water. He's trying to preserve a moment of beauty before everything falls apart. Marcus looked at Rachel. These aren't political documents. They're not valuable in a monetary sense. They're just human. People trying to hold on to normal life while the world burns around them. Rachel understood immediately what her great-great-grandfather had struggled with. These letters were private, intimate, the kind of thoughts people share with family, never imagining strangers would read them a century later. But they were also history, evidence that the aristocrats killed in the revolution weren't just faceless oppressors. They were parents and children and spouses. They worried about firewood and piano lessons and sunsets. Sharing these letters would humanize people that history had turned into symbols, but would also violate their privacy in death. What do we do? Tyler asked. Rachel looked at the letters, at the crowds, at the library that her great-great-grandfather had built as a memorial to his wife's belief in knowledge. We preserve them, she said finally. We digitize them, translate them, make them available to researchers and historians. But we don't sensationalize them. We don't publish them in books or make them viral online. We treat them with respect, with dignity. We let people who genuinely want to understand that moment in history access them, but we don't force them into the public consciousness. That's splitting the difference, Diane observed. Yes, because that's what great-great-grandfather wanted. He wanted someone to make a thoughtful choice. Not an easy one, a right one. The letters were transferred to the Library of Congress, part of their Romanov archive. They were digitized, translated by Russian-language scholars, and made available to researchers who submitted proposals explaining how they'd use the material. They weren't hidden, but they weren't exploited either. Rachel received letters from historians thanking her for preserving this crucial primary source material. She received letters from Romanov descendants expressing gratitude that their ancestors were being treated as humans, not just historical footnotes. And she received one letter that meant more than all the others combined. It came from Russia, handwritten in careful English. Dear Mrs. Morrison, my name is Dmitry Malkin. I am your great-great-grandfather's nephew. My grandmother was his sister, the one who fled to Poland during the pogroms. I only recently discovered that Victor survived, that he made it to America, that he became Thomas Morrison. My family searched for him for years after the war, but we thought he died. Finding out he lived, that he built a life, that he preserved the Romanov legacy, that he left gifts for his descendants, it's given my family something we never had before. Hope. We're still in Russia, still Jewish, still struggling, though not as our ancestors did. But knowing that Victor survived, that his courage and conscience echoed across generations, it reminds us that we come from strong people, people who endured impossible things. Thank you for telling his story, for telling our story, for proving that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't gold or jewels, but truth and memory and human connection across time. Your cousin, Dmitry. Rachel framed that letter, hung it in the museum next to her great-great-grandfather's original letters, because that ultimately was the real treasure. Not wealth, not gold, but connection, legacy, the knowledge that what we do echoes forward, touching lives we'll never meet in ways we can't imagine. 10 more years passed. Rachel was now 58 years old, grandmother to 3 children, still running the foundation that had helped over 100,000 families afford medical care. Tyler was chief of pediatric neurology at the same hospital where Dr. Chun had practiced before retirement. He'd pioneered new surgical techniques for childhood epilepsy, saving hundreds of lives. Diane had reconciled fully with Rachel. They weren't as close as they'd once been, but they were sisters again. They had dinner once a month, compared notes on grandchildren, argued about politics, and occasionally visited their father's grave together. The Morrison Collection Museums had opened in 3 cities, telling the story of Victor Malkin's journey from Russia to America, from persecution to preservation, from guilt to grace. And Rachel had finally stopped looking for more hidden treasures. 3 gifts had been enough. More than enough. Or so she thought. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, Rachel received a package at her home. No return address. Just her name and address in handwriting that made her heart stop. She knew that handwriting. Had seen it on letters written 70 years ago. Inside the package was a small wooden box, ornately carved. In a letter to Rachel Morrison, it began, "If you're reading this, I've been dead for 6 decades. But I planned ahead. There is no 4th gift. No more hidden treasures. This is something different. Inside this box is my wedding ring. The one Margaret gave me in 1918 when we married in a small church in Oregon, both of us far from home, both of us trying to build something new from the ruins of our past. I wore this ring for 30 years. It never came off my finger while she was alive. When she died, I took it off and I never wore another. This ring isn't valuable. It's just gold, nothing special. But it represents something more important than any coin or document or historical artifact. It represents a choice. The choice to love, to build, to create something good even when the world is cruel, to be kind when kindness costs everything. Margaret saved me, not from poverty or danger, but from myself, from the guilt and grief that would have consumed me. She taught me that preserving the past was important, but building the future was essential. I'm giving you this ring not as treasure, but as a reminder. You found my gifts. You've used them wisely. You've honored the dead and helped the living. But don't spend your whole life looking backward. Don't let my story consume yours. The real treasure, Rachel, isn't what I left behind. It's what you build with what remains of your life. Love your family. Help strangers. Create beauty. Tell truth. Build bridges, literal and metaphorical. Leave the world better than you found it. That's the real legacy. Not gold or documents or letters, but the ripples of goodness that spread from every kind act, every difficult choice, every moment of grace under pressure. I was Victor Malkin. I became Thomas Morrison. I built bridges and hid fortunes and preserved history. But my greatest achievement was loving Margaret. Everything else was just details. Love well, Rachel. That's the final gift. The one that can't be hidden in cornerstones or toolboxes. The one you have to give yourself every day in 1,000 small choices to be kind, to be honest, to be brave. You've proven yourself worthy 100 times over. Now, prove yourself human. With love across time, Victor. Rachel sat in her living room, holding the simple gold band, and cried. Not from sadness or grief, but from understanding. She'd spent 15 years following her great-great-grandfather's trail, finding his gifts, preserving his legacy, telling his story. But he was right. The treasure wasn't in the finding. It was in the living. That evening, Rachel gathered her family. Tyler and his wife and their 3 children. Diane and her husband and their 2 kids. Rachel's partner, Mark, a museum curator she'd met 5 years ago who understood her passion for history and shared her commitment to making the world better. They ate dinner together, laughing and arguing and sharing stories. After the kids had been put to bed and the adults sat around with coffee, Rachel brought out the wooden box. Great-great-grandfather left me one more thing, she said. Not treasure, just a reminder. She passed around the wedding ring, Let everyone hold it, feel its weight. He built bridges, Rachel said. So many bridges. Physical ones across rivers. Metaphorical ones across time. Bridges between past and future, between rich and poor, between the dead and the living. And we're his bridges too. Every one of us. We carry his story forward. We take the gifts he left, and we use them to build something good. Tyler smiled. That's why I became a doctor. To build bridges between sick kids and healthy futures. I teach my kids about history, Diane added quietly. About great-great-grandfather, about the Romanovs, about how regular people navigate impossible situations. They're learning that doing the right thing matters more than being rich or powerful. And you? Mark looked at Rachel. What bridge are you building? Rachel thought about the foundation, the museums, the 15 years spent preserving her great-great-grandfather's legacy. But she also thought about the future, about the time she had left, about what she wanted to build with it. I think, she said slowly, that I'm ready to build something new. Great-great-grandfather's story is told. His gifts are preserved. His bridges are standing. Now it's time for me to build my own. What does that look like? Tyler asked. I don't know yet, but I know it starts with this, being present. Being here with all of you. Not chasing ghosts or hidden fortunes, but living the life I have right now. Today, creating memories that my grandchildren will treasure more than any gold coin. She slipped the wedding ring onto a chain around her neck. This is my reminder. Every day to love well, to build bridges, to be human. The family sat together as the evening deepened into night, and Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the satisfaction of completing a quest, but the quieter peace of knowing that the quest was never really about the finding. It was about the journey, the people you met along the way, the person you became in the process. Viktor Malkin had fled Russia with a fortune and a burden. He'd hidden his treasures carefully, trusting that someday someone would find them and use them wisely. Rachel Morrison had found them, had used them to save her son, preserve history, and help thousands of families. Had followed the trail her great-great-grandfather left across 8 decades. But the real treasure, she finally understood, was the choice to keep going, to keep building, to keep loving, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The coins had saved Tyler's life. The documents had preserved truth. The letters had honored the dead. But the ring, the simple gold band that represented a choice to love in the midst of chaos, that was the gift that would last forever. Because love wasn't something you found. It was something you built. One day, one choice, one bridge at a time. And that was a treasure worth more than all the gold in the world. 3 years after finding the wedding ring, Rachel Morrison woke up to a phone call that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her great-great-grandfather's story. Mrs. Morrison? The voice was elderly, female, with a thick accent she couldn't quite place. My name is Irina Kasparov. I'm calling from Prague. I have information about Viktor Malkin. Information that will change everything you believe about his story. Rachel sat up in bed, heart pounding. What kind of information? Not over the phone. Can you come to Prague? I'm 94 years old. I don't have much time left, and this story needs to be told before I die. Who are you? I was there, in Russia, in 1913. I knew Viktor before he became Thomas Morrison. I knew what really happened to the Romanov fortune. And Mrs. Morrison, everything your great-great-grandfather told you was a lie. The line went dead. Rachel tried calling back. The number was disconnected. She searched for Irina Kasparov online and found nothing. It was as if the woman didn't exist. But something about the call felt real. Urgent. True. She told Mark about it over breakfast. It's probably a scam, he said reasonably. Someone trying to get money out of you by claiming they have secret information. She didn't ask for money. She asked me to come to Prague. Even worse. You show up, and then they rob you or kidnap you, or worse. But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling. For 3 years, she believed her great-great-grandfather's story was complete. 3 gifts, 3 lessons, 1 beautiful legacy of courage and conscience. What if it wasn't complete? What if there was more? Against everyone's advice, Rachel booked a flight to Prague. She didn't tell Tyler or Diane, knowing they'd try to stop her. She only told Mark, who insisted on coming with her. If you're walking into danger, he said firmly, you're not doing it alone. They arrived in Prague on a cold November morning. The city was beautiful in that faded European way, all Gothic spires and cobblestone streets, and buildings that remembered centuries. Rachel had received one more message before leaving, a text from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Old Jewish Cemetery. Come alone. I don't like this, Mark said as they checked into their hotel. This has all the hallmarks of a setup. I have to know if there's even a chance she's telling the truth. What if your great-great-grandfather did lie? What if the whole story was false? Are you prepared for that? Rachel wasn't sure. She'd built her entire life around Victor Malkin's legacy. The foundation, the museums, the carefully preserved narrative of a good man making difficult choices. If that was a lie, what was left? But she had to know. The next afternoon, Rachel entered the Old Jewish Cemetery alone. Mark waited at a cafe across the street, phone ready to call police if she didn't emerge within an hour. The cemetery was ancient, crowded with thousands of tilted gravestones packed impossibly close together. Some dated back to the 1400s. It was a place where history pressed in from all sides, where the dead outnumbered the living. An elderly woman sat on a bench near the far wall. She was tiny, wrapped in a heavy coat despite the mild weather. Her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Mrs. Morrison," she said as Rachel approached. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. You said my great-great-grandfather lied. I need to know what you mean." Irina gestured to the bench beside her. "Sit. This will take time." Rachel sat, her body tense with anticipation and dread. "I was born in Moscow in 1931, Irina began. "But my mother told me stories. Stories about her father, about the revolution, about what really happened to the Romanov fortune. My grandfather worked for Grand Duke Mikhail. He was Victor Malkin's partner." "Partner in what?" "In the theft." Irina's eyes gleamed. "Victor didn't save the Romanov fortune, Mrs. Morrison. He stole it." Rachel's blood went cold. "That's not true. He wrote letters explaining. He wrote letters creating a narrative. A beautiful story of a Jewish boy saved by kind aristocrats, entrusted with their wealth, burdened by guilt. It's a wonderful story. It's also fiction." "How do you know?" Irina pulled a weathered envelope from her coat. "Because my grandfather wrote the truth before he died, and he gave it to my mother with instructions to find Victor's descendants when the time was right. I've been searching for you for 5 years, Mrs. Morrison. Ever since your first discovery made international news." She handed Rachel the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Russian. Irina translated as Rachel's eyes scanned the incomprehensible text. "My name is Alexei Volkov. I write this confession knowing I will die soon. I was Victor Malkin's partner in the greatest theft of the century, and I can no longer carry this secret alone. Victor and I were not kind couriers saved by benevolent aristocrats. We were thieves. Smart thieves, but thieves nonetheless. We worked for the Romanov household, yes, but we were never trusted. We were servants, Jews, beneath notice. When revolution came, we saw an opportunity. The family was preparing to flee, packing their wealth into trunks and boxes. Victor and I helped them pack during the day. And at night, we stole. Not everything. Just enough that they wouldn't notice immediately. Coins from one collection, documents from another, jewelry from a third. We were careful, methodical, and when the family finally fled, Victor and I fled too, but in the opposite direction. We divided our spoils. I went to England. Victor went to America. We promised to never speak of it again, to never contact each other, to take our secret to our graves. I kept my promise. Victor apparently did not. He created a mythology around his theft, turned himself into a tragic hero. And I, the coward that I am, said nothing. But I want Victor's descendants to know the truth. That fortune was stolen. Every coin, every document, every piece was taken from people who were already losing everything. Victor wasn't a guardian. He was a thief who got away with it. And his guilt, if he felt any, was deserved. Rachel's hands shook as she lowered the letter. This can't be real. You're lying. Why would I lie? What do I gain? Your great-great-grandfather is long dead. His reputation, means nothing to me. But the truth matters. And the truth is that the Romanov family never gave him anything. He stole it all. The letters and the cornerstone. The documents. They prove he stole documents along with everything else. Mrs. Morrison, use your intelligence. If the Romanovs were truly giving their fortune to a trusted servant, why hide it so thoroughly? Why create elaborate puzzles? Why not simply give him paperwork proving legal transfer? Rachel's mind raced. She'd never questioned the narrative because it was beautiful, because it made her great-great-grandfather a hero, because it made her own choices seem noble rather than just lucky. Even if this is true, Rachel said slowly, it was over a century ago. Everyone involved is dead. What difference does it make now? Irina leaned forward. It makes a difference to the truth. You've built museums celebrating Viktor Malkin as a hero. You've told his story to millions of people. Children learn about his courage in schools. But it's a lie, Mrs. Morrison. And lies, even beautiful ones, corrode everything they touch. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth. Add this to the historical record. Let people know that Viktor Malkin was complicated, that he did wrong even as he tried to do right, that he spent his life trying to redeem a theft he never confessed to. Rachel stood up, her legs unsteady. I need to think about this. Of course. But Mrs. Morrison, think about what your great-great-grandfather really taught you. Not the mythology, but the reality. He taught you that people make mistakes, that they carry guilt, that they try to make amends in whatever ways they can. That's more human and more true than any hero story. Rachel walked out of the cemetery in a daze. Mark met her at the entrance, took one look at her face, and wrapped her in his arms. What happened? Everything I believed might be a lie. Back at the hotel, Rachel spread out the documents Irina had given her. The letter from Alexei Volkov, photographs showing him and Viktor together, young men and servants' clothing standing beside Romanov carriages. Manifest records from ships leaving Russia in 1913, showing Alexei going to England while Viktor went to America. Mark studied everything with his curator's eye. This could be authentic. The paper is the right age. The photographs show proper aging. The handwriting matches samples of period Russian script, but could also be forged. Someone with resources could create convincing fakes. True, we need to authenticate everything properly. Mark looked at her. Rachel, do you want this to be true or false? She thought about the question honestly. I don't know. Part of me wants to defend great-great-grandfather's reputation. But part of me thinks Irina might be right. That a complicated truth is better than a simple lie. What would change if you announced this? If you told the world that Viktor Malkin was a thief? Everything. The museums would need new narratives. The Foundation's origin story would be tainted. People who've been inspired by his courage would feel betrayed. Or, Mark said quietly, they'd understand that humans are complicated. That even people who do wrong can spend the rest of their lives trying to make it right. That redemption is possible even for thieves. Rachel spent 3 sleepless nights in Prague, wrestling with the decision. She met with Irina twice more, reviewing every piece of evidence, asking every question she could think of. Finally, on their last day in Prague, Rachel made her choice. I'm going to authenticate everything, she told Irina. Properly, through multiple independent sources. If it checks out, if this is genuine, then yes, I'll add it to the historical record. But I won't sensationalize it. I won't turn Viktor into a villain any more than I turned him into a hero. Irina nodded. That's fair. That's all I ask. But Irina, why did you wait? Why not come forward when I first discovered the coins 10 years ago? The old woman smiled sadly. Because I needed to know what kind of person you were. Whether you'd use the fortune for yourself or for others. Viktor's partner, my grandfather, he kept his stolen wealth hidden. Never spent it. Let guilt consume him. He died poor and bitter. But you, Mrs. Morrison, you used Viktor's theft to save your son and help thousands of families. You turned stolen goods into acts of grace. That's redemption. That's what my grandfather could never do. I wanted to make sure Viktor's story ended better than Alexei's did. Rachel flew home with more questions than answers. She contacted authentication experts, forensic document analysts, historians who specialized in the Russian Revolution. She gave them everything Irina had provided. The analysis took 6 months. When the results came back, they were conclusive. Alexei Volkov's letter was genuine. The photographs were authentic. The ship manifests were real. Viktor Malkin and Alexei Volkov had indeed worked together for the Romanov household. And there was no record of any official transfer of wealth, no documentation that the family had entrusted anything to Viktor. The evidence suggested Irina was right. Viktor Malkin had stolen the Romanov fortune. Rachel called a press conference. She stood before cameras and journalists, feeling like she was about to destroy everything she'd built. 10 years ago, she began, I discovered a hidden fortune left by my great-great-grandfather, Viktor Malkin. I told you a story about a hero who preserved wealth entrusted to him by a dying aristocratic family. That story inspired millions of people. It inspired me. Today, I'm here to tell you that story was incomplete. New evidence has emerged suggesting that Viktor Malkin didn't receive the Romanov fortune as a gift. He stole it. The room erupted in questions. Rachel held up her hand for silence. I know this is shocking. I know many of you feel betrayed. I felt betrayed too when I first learned this. But as I've had time to process this information, I've come to understand something important. Viktor Malkin was not a hero or a villain. He was a human being who made a terrible choice in desperate circumstances. He stole from people who were already losing everything. That was wrong, unforgivably wrong. But then he spent the rest of his life trying to make amends. He could have used that stolen wealth for himself. He could have lived like a king. Instead, he hid it, preserved it, created puzzles that would ensure it eventually helped people who needed it. He couldn't return what he'd stolen. The people he stole from were dead, scattered, erased by history. So he did the only thing he could do. He tried to ensure that his theft would ultimately serve good rather than evil. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it does show that people can change. That guilt can become a force for good. That even our worst mistakes can be transformed into something meaningful if we're willing to spend our lives making amends. Rachel paused, looking directly at the cameras. The Morrison Foundation will continue its work. The museums will update their exhibits to reflect this new understanding. We won't hide Viktor's theft, but we won't let it erase everything he tried to do afterward either. Because the real lesson here isn't that heroes exist and villains exist, and you should sort people into one category or the other. The real lesson is that humans are complicated. We make mistakes. We carry guilt. And if we're lucky, we get the chance to spend our lives trying to be better than we were. Viktor Malkin was a thief, but he was also a bridge builder, a preserver of history, and a man who tried to redeem himself through decades of careful guardianship. Both things can be true. Both things are true. The aftermath was messy. Some people felt betrayed and angry. Museum attendance dropped. The foundation lost donors. Rachel received hate mail from people who felt she'd deliberately deceived them. But others understood. Historians praised her honesty. Ethicists wrote articles about the complexity of judging people across centuries. And slowly, a new narrative emerged. Viktor Malkin became a case study in restorative justice, in how people who do wrong can spend their lives trying to make things right, in how guilt can be transformed into purpose. Tyler called her the night after the press conference. Mom, I've been getting questions at the hospital. People asking if I feel differently knowing great-great-grandfather was a thief. What do you tell them? I tell them that he stole a fortune and used it to save my life. That both things are true. That I can acknowledge the wrong he did while being grateful for the good that ultimately came from it. Is that okay? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. That's perfect, baby. That's exactly right. Diane's response was more complicated. She showed up at Rachel's house unannounced, walked in without knocking, and threw a newspaper on the kitchen table. You've destroyed our family name. I told the truth. You told a truth that makes us look like descendants of criminals. We are descendants of criminals, and also descendants of someone who spent his life trying to make amends. Both things can be true, Diane. Easy for you to say. You already got your millions, already built your reputation. Now you get to seem noble by confessing, and the rest of us have to live with the shame. Rachel stood up, facing her sister. What would you have preferred? That I keep lying? That I let the hero story stand, even though it's false? Yes, some lies are better than the truth. Some stories should stay buried. That's where we're different. I think the truth always matters, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs us something. Diane left without another word. It would be 3 years before they spoke again. But others reached out with support. Descendants of other Romanov servants, families who'd had their own stories of survival and guilt and complicated choices. They thanked Rachel for showing that history wasn't simple, that people weren't simple, that redemption was possible even across generations. And Irina Kasparov sent one final letter before she died. Dear Rachel, thank you for having the courage to tell the truth. My grandfather lived his entire life consumed by guilt over what he and Victor did. He never tried to make amends, never tried to transform his theft into something good. He just hid and suffered. Victor chose differently. He carried the same guilt, but he turned it into purpose, into guardianship, into a legacy that ultimately saved your son and helped thousands of families. That's the difference between someone who does wrong and gives up and someone who does wrong and spend their life trying to be better. Thank you for showing the world that second option exists. That redemption is real. That humans are complicated, and that's okay. Your great-great-grandfather was a thief, but he was also someone who tried every day for the rest of his life to be better than his worst choice. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than our worst choice. With gratitude, Irina. Rachel framed that letter and hung it in her office, a reminder that truth was always better than comfortable lies, and that complexity was more human than simplicity. 2 years after the revelation, Rachel stood in the newly renovated Morrison Museum. The exhibits had been completely redesigned to tell the fuller story. The first room showed Victor Malkin as he really was, a young Jewish man fleeing persecution, a servant working for aristocrats, a person facing impossible choices in impossible times. The second room displayed the evidence of theft, the documents Irina had provided, the analysis showing no legal transfer, the hard truth that Victor had stolen from people who were already losing everything. The third room showed his life in America, building bridges, hiding his guilt and his fortune, creating puzzles that would outlast him. And the final room showed the aftermath. Tyler's surgery, the foundation, the thousands of families helped, the historical documents preserved, the truth eventually told. Above the exit, a quote from Victor's final letter was carved into the wall. The greatest gift is not gold or documents or even truth. It's the choice to keep trying, to keep building, to keep becoming better than you were. That's redemption. That's what it means to be human. Rachel stood beneath those words, thinking about the journey from desperate single mother to guardian of a complicated legacy, about all the choices she'd made along the way, about truth and lies and the messy space in between. Her phone buzzed. Tyler, sending a photo of his daughter wearing a doctor's coat for career day at school. She wants to be like Daddy and help sick kids, his text read. Great-great-great-grandfather would be proud. Rachel smiled. Yes, he would be, because that was the real legacy. Not the theft, or the fortune, or even the preservation, but the chain of choices, each generation trying to be better, to do more good, to transform inherited guilt into purpose. Victor Malkin had made a terrible choice at 22 years old, and he'd spent the next 60 years trying to balance the scales, trying to ensure that his theft would ultimately save lives rather than line pockets. He'd succeeded, imperfectly, incompletely, but genuinely. And Rachel, his great-great-granddaughter, had inherited not just his fortune, but his burden. The burden of turning wrongs into rights, of telling hard truths, of building bridges between past and future. She walked through the museum one more time, seeing visitors engage with the complicated story. Some were angry, some were inspired, some were just confused, trying to figure out if Victor was good or bad, hero or villain. But the smartest ones understood. The ones who got it knew that Victor was neither hero nor villain. He was human, flawed and guilty and trying. just trying every day to be better than his worst choice. And in the end, trying was enough. Not perfect, but enough. Because that's all any of us can do. Acknowledge our mistakes. Carry our guilt. Try to transform our wrongs into something right. Build bridges. Tell truth. Love well. That was Victor Malkin's real treasure. Not gold or documents or clever hiding places. Just a choice to keep trying. To keep building. To keep becoming better. And that treasure, Rachel thought as she locked up the museum and headed home to her family, that treasure was infinite and eternal and real. The kind of treasure you couldn't find in a toolbox or a cornerstone. The kind you built yourself, one difficult choice at a time. The kind that lasted forever. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.